Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cloud Disaster Recovery as a Service Tech Talk. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at phoenixNAP. And with me today, my compatriot in all things data protection, Michael Deemer, Systems Engineer at Veeam. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you very much, William. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's jump into it. So today we're going to talk a little more techie, a little bit more tangible about what you can do, how you can do it, but we're still going to start with the why, right? Like, why is everybody here? And certainly we know that, everybody's familiar with the kind of high level basic use cases around disaster recovery, why you need it. My environment crashes, my data center goes offline, a hurricane hits, but increasingly, companies are finding it a quick and cost-effective way to recover from other types of cyber attacks. And ransomware is dominating that landscape more than anything. We're actually going to talk a little bit about even some of the enhancements to ransomware over the last few years. And ultimately, when you look at continuous replication or snapshot-based replication as clean recovery points that you can select from as you're beginning your recovery, a lot of times that cloud-based disaster recovery can offer you a very robust point-in-time recovery capability that gets your business, at least your critical infrastructure components, back up and running in the face of some type of ransomware or cybersecurity issue. And certainly isn't just ransomware, it can be all kinds of things. Vulnerabilities that are exploited, like the Log4j vulnerability that we just had. But ultimately, increasing attacks on corporate networks are just through the roof. And what we see more than anything, and what we will continue to see more than anything, is cyber warfare, right? And we're going to end up in situations over the next number of years and potentially in perpetuity where the best way to attack someone else is via a digital asset instead of with what's going on right now. And ultimately, the people that are being attacked, you might imagine, would look something like this, right? Sources of information and education and resource, government, military, higher education institutions, telecommunications firms, ISPs, MSPs, right? Managed service providers are being heavily targeted because they have access to a lot of different environments that can provide kind of a jump off point for the attacker to infiltrate other organizations. And we saw a bunch of vulnerabilities and backdoors and different pieces of software over the last couple of years. But yeah, I think this is a really good breakdown in terms of like attacks against a certain vertical space. And if you're in that space, certainly you need to be protecting yourself more than others. So what do we have here now in 2022? We've got brand new stuff kind of coming to the forefront, and things where ransomware attacks are evolving and becoming multi-layered in such a way that you think you've recovered from them and you haven't, right? And or you pay a ransom, God forbid, do not recommend, right? You pay a ransom and then they just hit you again because the vulnerability, however they got in, is still there and available, and it's just easy to come back and try to get more from you, right? And maybe it's not the same, company, but it's a different one. And then what we're seeing is just a ton of SaaSified malware capabilities where people are selling platforms to other people to launch attacks on, or to launch attacks kind of as a service. And then ultimately, when we look at the security landscape, we're starting to see it's not so much like we obviously have a whole other talk about why people are going towards hybrid and why, you know, infrastructure is being spread across different types of cloud providers. But specifically around security, the demand to have a comprehensive security framework, technical security framework across cloud implementations is huge. Standardized network security, standardized system security, right? All these things are super important. Visibility across an entire ecosystem of cloud providers. And so why does this matter, right? Like why, you know, what can you do essentially to make sure that you are putting together thoughts for your organization to help them make an educated decision about how they're going to assess their business continuity and implement disaster recovery, implement disaster recovery protections. Sometimes those look like backups. Sometimes those look like DR replication. We're going to talk some about that, right? So ultimately, you're trying to limit the disruption to your business through these types of protections. And when you are performing that assessment, trying to understand the financial consequences of some type of availability issue, whether it's via some type of malware, ransomware, or some type of DDoS attack or whatever, right? That is going to be the key to establishing the budget for how you you spend on these types of solutions. And so let's walk through some of these. When you look at recovery time versus cost, you end up with a scatter plot of sorts of availability options, things that you can do to improve your capabilities to recover or reduce your costs at the expense of those RTOs and RPOs, right? And ultimately, you have a ton of solutions at your fingertips. And I think the thing that we're seeing today is that this line, this teal line, is shifting down like this. And people are trying to get closer to this middle area by automating the restoration of backups. And we've got a great solution. Veeam, Backblaze, and phoenixNAP put together a solution where you can launch bare metal instances on demand and recover Veeam virtual machines that you've put in Backblaze via this set of scripts that orchestrate infrastructure as a service platforms with phoenixNAP, right? There's warm site DR, which is kind of what we're pushing most of our organizations that come to us to talk about what they should be doing. And that cost is coming down a ton. The cost of implementing a continuous replication solution that gets your storage, your data gravity migrated to a cloud provider has been cut to a third of what it was 5 years ago. And with very, very, very slight dings in your recovery time objective and recovery point objective, right? And ultimately, the Cadillac solution still exists. There are, super fast replication technologies. There are complete implementations. There are synchronous storage replication options. There's so many things that you can do to ensure a bulletproof, instant recovery of your data. But they cost the most money. Certainly where you're going to spend to try to replicate everything in your environment. And so we typically recommend that people look at not only not doing that and going all whole hog into building like hot site full replication, but also looking at what's most important in your environment and staggering that investment across this landscape. Some things just need to be on some tape and sent off site. Some things, should be online and accessible for instant restorations, but are essentially just a backup in case something happens. Some things have to be replicated in such a way that you can recover very quickly, because if you don't, your organization will suffer. And so when you get to this implementation checklist of sorts, and the PowerPoint's available, I think it's in the handout section of the GoToWebinar platform, but you have this roadmap for your organization. It all starts with the assessment, understanding what you have, understanding the level of sensitivity of that data looks like, putting all that together into a tiered recovery capability, and implementing control objectives from a compliance and security perspective that meet your organization's needs, and then going ahead and building that complete disaster recovery plan and test. Because ultimately, the replication recovery point objectives that you've established, whether they're backups, whether they're replicant oriented, they're only as good as the quality of the recovery. And if you don't test, you don't know. And organizations constantly, even our customers, because we don't force you to do anything, right? They don't test their backups. They don't test their replication. And ultimately, they end up in pretty bad situation at some point. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Mike. He's going to walk through exactly what Veeam does to help you guys with this component. And then I'll come back and I'll tie it all together around how Veeam and pnap work together to make this super simple, super easy for your organization.
Well, sweet. I can take it over from here. Thank you very much, William. Again, guys, my name is Michael Deemer, Systems Engineer here for Veeam Software, and I'm going to be taking you to the deep dive of the Veeam perspective. But I do want to just take a quick pause and kind of go over what William just said, right? Is regardless of vertical or regardless of what genre you guys are in, everybody's going to be exposed or vulnerable to certain risks just because of the nature of the environment that we live in, right? This is something that's not going away. Ransomware isn't a fad. It is not like, oh, in 2 more years, it's just going to go away. It's actually the opposite. I mean, I've been hands on the keyboard for nearly a decade, and from the beginning of my time to currently now, ransomware has only gained traction and got more and more prevalent and more sophisticated over time. So there's a lot of things to say. Really, what the big thing that I really want to move into is one of the big things is the 3-2-1 strategy. Now, that's going to be here on our next slide, is going to be kind of talking about 3-2-1. Now, most of you guys, I would hope, have heard about it at some point or another. If your current company isn't talking about it, I would highly suggest to start to look to other places if they're not talking about the 3-2-1 rule or the 3-2-1-0 rule. Now, this isn't just a random rule that, phoenixNAP and Veeam came up with. This is something that's been around for decades, and it's been around for a really long time. This is making sure that we're ensuring data resiliency across the board. Now, one thing I do want to take a step with is, kind of breaking this down. Now, there's 3, 2, and 1. Now, from the left hand of the screen, the 3 different copies. Now, the 3 different copies of your data, these are going to be active fulls. So think of, in our case, in Veeam's case, I should say, they're actually called VBKs, so active fulls of that particular data. And having 3 different copies of them is very key. Now, the second portion of this is having 2 forms of different media, whether that's SSD, NVMe, tape, you name it, as long as there are 2 different types of media that we can land those particular backups on, because that way we can separate if the tape array goes bad or the virtual tape library, or if all your eggs were in the same basket and your SSD had a failure, you have multiple different ways to restore that data. And then at 1, this is very, very important, is having 1 offsite. I highly suggest phoenixNAP to have that offsite repository or even disaster recovery site completely ready for you. Now, once we kind of pair all those together, the 3-2-1 strategy, we get 0 errors after backup and recovery. Now, backup and recovery verification, I just want to take a little bit into that. Basically what that is, it's a scheduled or a scripted backup that allows you to do heartbeat tests, ping tests, and an application test, making sure that that backup that we just took is actually going to be good and valid, and then we can stuff that to wherever we need accordingly. Now, what I really kind of want to show you guys is what happens when ransomware hits, right? So what happens when it really comes down and it is actually in production. Now, I do want to take a quick second here because I'm going to be building off of this slide. I want to kind of get everybody familiar with it. So on the left-hand side, we have some virtual machines there, and then we have our hypervisor. Whether that's Hyper-V, VMware, or Nutanix, really doesn't matter there. And then underneath that hypervisor, we would have our production storage. Whether that's HPE, Nimble, NetApp, or Dell, these are all going to be taking storage snapshots. So at the bottom, kind of in the center there, you can see that we're leveraging modern snapshots every hour on the hour, right? And then above that, that little box that says Veeam, that is the actual Veeam backup and replication server. So that's your head end or your brains of the operation for the Veeam side. You see that green line that goes down to the on-demand sandbox. Then in the middle, the tape library, right? And then off to the right, we have our backup target, right? So let's just see what actually happens when, you get hit with ransomware, right? So you have those cryptowares that are now inside of your production virtual machines, and you're probably going to get some type of message saying, hey, we have taken all of your databases, your applications, file, and all of your data. We like to get paid in Bitcoin or Ethereum or either some type of, maybe even a smaller coin or a non-fungible coin that is out there that's not as relevant as others. And basically what's going to happen is once we kind of figure that we got hit with ransomware, the very first thing we need to do is make sure that we have a secure restore point, right? So we can do a couple different options, right? Since we're taking modern snapshots, we can actually go take that last snapshot from the last hour, because we're taking one on the hour every hour, push that to a sandbox, and make sure that we are actually testing that backup. Because the last thing we want to do is just say, hey, if you didn't, a lot of times, and William brought this up earlier, having a plan is absolutely key. Because I can tell you from being an MSP admin myself, when ransomware hits or any type of big exploit that brings down production, most admins run around like their heads cut off, because it is absolutely pure panic, because we have to get that back up in production, right? But having some type of DR plan in place is absolutely key, so we can bring certain virtual machines on, certain file servers on, certain SQL servers on in a timely fashion and in the way that they need to be failed on, so that way the company can keep on going on and they can keep money without losing their big moneymaker servers. Now, kind of going back here a little bit, we got hit by ransomware and we sent to the on-demand sandbox for testing. That way we can ensure resiliency and verify the backup. And this is all automated, so it's really cool stuff there. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more here on our next slide about the recovery from storage snapshots. So with recovery from storage snapshots, let's kind of break this down. Most people are normally used to taking a backup once a day. And I would say that's a conglomerate, a lot of people. And I would say having a backup once a day is absolutely great. And you're a step ahead of most of your corresponding neighbors. However, if we can leverage modern storage snapshots, this is absolutely something I always suggest, regardless with the environment. Because we are getting that much more granular flexibility out of it, because instead of taking it once at night at 8 p.m., and then you got to wait until the next day at 8 p.m., and let's just say you had a failure at 1 or 12 or 1 o'clock and the stand's now bad, well, guess what? You lost a lot of that data because you're not taking the snapshot or not taking a frequent backup during that time. And that's where the snapshot capability really comes into play. And then moving down here just a little bit, I want to talk about our Veeam Explorer series. Basically what this is how you get your data back, right? So this is how you do Exchange. You need to go in there and find a mailbox. You need to go and find Sally's email from HR. Absolutely doable. Same thing for Active Directory. You need to restore an AD user. You need to go make sure that they have the right security group, the right credentials. Easy, just like that. Same thing with SQL, Microsoft SharePoint, Oracle. And these are how you get your data back very granularly. It's all built out, very easy to use, and just left click and point and go exactly where you need to go. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is time to restore, right? So again, the same slide that we're currently building off of, and it looks like, we still have some type of cryptoware, maybe even a supply chain attack, or, whatever type of exploit is currently in that production environment, right? So now we have a whole bunch of different options that we currently have, right? So we have that Veeam backup and replication box here in the center, and that very bottom right one, we could stuff it off to Cloud Connect, right? That's phoenixNAP. So if we need to send that data, or that phoenixNAP actually needs to send that data back and, restore back into production, this is absolutely something they can do because they're the offsite target. They can just go, hey, this has been scanned, everything has been good, there is no ransomware in here. All right, now let's push it back against the wire and push it back into production. Now, the other one is offline tape library, something like, Iron Mountain, something like that, and having some type of offline media. So that way, if you do need to restore, yeah, it's quite a bit slower because it's offline. You got to wait for snail mail to get it to you most of the time, right? But the big one is, we also have other granular functionalities with our current backup target, right? So that local backup target that we have on-prem, we can also use to do any type of restore, whether it's granular restores of databases, files, or even applications, or just a full-blown recovery of that particular production virtual machine, right? So very good stuff here to know. And really what we want to do is we want to run and restore from a storage snapshot, really making sure that we understand what's going on. And then the other thing is we want to run from, a secure backup target. So a lot of good stuff here that we can use and leverage. We're very flexible and agile in that particular sense of where we can come from and where we go. Anything from offsite with phoenixNAP all the way to a local tape repository that's offline or a backup target that we can use. Now, the other thing I want to kind of talk about is knowing and, how do we know that we're protected, right? I think that is actually the key, is making sure here on our next slide is knowing, what we're actually protecting against, right? So what we use here in Veeam, again, still the same slide, but you see at the very bottom, we have Veeam 1. So Veeam 1, what it does is it performs and backups assessment of your current environment. Really, this is your eyes and ears. This is going to be showing you a lot of different things. Honestly, I use it a ton. I use it for under and overused virtual machines. I also use it for a ransomware alarm. The ransomware alarm goes something like this. Hey, your last backup for the last 60 days on this one physical or virtual machine has, been writing maybe 5-10 megs a day. But all of a sudden, 3 o'clock in the morning, it has now written 12 terabytes in active full, and it's looking very suspicious. And Veeam 1 is going to alert you about that, send you an SMTP report and say, hey, I would highly advise to look at this. This looks very suspicious. There's also a lot of other cool things Veeam 1 can do in a nutshell. Visio diagrams, so you put it in your environment and you let it go out there and kind of find everything that it's in there reporting on and collecting all that data. So if you need to build out a Visio diagram and you want IP addresses, subnets, and all the things that kind of go along with it, very, very, very useful tool. And also the biggest one that Veeam 1 is going to do is making sure that you're protected, making sure that no VMs are left out there stranded that have no backups on them. So very good stuff here to know. Now, this is some of the cool stuff that I really, really like. So this is some newer technology, just in general for Veeam. This is our Hardened Linux repository. Our Hardened Linux repository is an absolute beast. Basically what this is a Linux repository on-prem, or a Linux server running Ubuntu, Red Hat, Debian, CentOS, you name it, we can run for the most part on the newer, later, and greater, Red Hats and all those distros. But more importantly, this is a local repository that we can use to prevent against ransomware. So instead of, having something not only just in the cloud, but you can have something local. So that way, if anything happens locally, you have a local repository that's completely immutable. And how we actually do that is we actually deny the deletion of backups. So if you actually look here on our next slide, I'll kind of show you what it looks like in like a log per se. So if somebody was able to get your access to Veeam backup and replication, let's just say, and you were and the actor was able to get access, and there was insider protection set up, and there was the local Linux repository was set up, you're going to be able to see that there's a denial action right away, right in the log. It's going to say, hey, I can't actually delete that data. We don't have access. It's a one-way route. We use temporary credentials to do that. And the other thing is we're marking it as with a mutable flag. Once it's marked with an immutable flag, it's, kick rocks, pound sand, you're not touching it. It's just how it is. There's nothing inside of the other than, kicking the Linux box itself is gonna help you. So something kind of to note here. And the big thing is, from the security side here on our next slide, is we don't use the root account. We use single-use only credentials. These are single-use only. Basically, think of these as like one-way credentials. Now, of course, you can always restore from the Linux immutable repository. But this just comes down to, if you guys are used to Linux, having a root of anything gives you access to everything because you're the root admin. So we use non-root accounts with single-use only credentials, and then we kind of burn them on the way out. And the other big thing is we use XFS for leveraging block cloning, so we get the best out of that particular repository, making sure that we can align all the file blocks and all the data blocks consistently, allowing for the most compact local repository. And then I want to draw your eyes to one last thing before I get to my next slide, is that little green box at the very bottom. And this is how you actually set an immutable backup. It's very simple. It's not very complex at all. It's just setting the repository and marking the amount of immutable period that you want to do. In this particular case, it's going to be immutable for 30 days, right? And this is going to make sure that, ransomware and hackers aren't able to get in and do that kind of malicious damage across your production environment. Now, I do want to take a little bit of a step back and actually talk about how do we get from one place to another, right? So this is archived here. So, and I want to kind of break this down. So in the nutshell, this is called SOBR, a scale out backup repository. Now you have your performance tier, and I want you guys to think as the performance tier as local spinning disk. And for me or for Veeam, I don't care if that's NVMe drives, SANs, SSD, a NAS, a file server, a Linux hardened repository, whatever that may be. That's going to be local spinning disks that we need to target first. And then capacity tier is actually where we would scale out to. So this would be like object storage, maybe Amazon, phoenixNAP, Azure, things like that, right? And now we do have a policy-based driven way to move to what's called archive tier. Now, archive tier is something a little newer. This is, think of cold storage, like complete cold storage, so like Glacier or Blob, right? So we can absolutely move grandfather, father, son. And what is GFS? So let me kind of break that down. I think some people may go, oh yeah, I know what GFS is, and some may not. So what is grandfather, father, son, or GFS? And this is recovery points of active fulls in your environment. Think of weeklies, yearlies, monthly, that kind of a situation where we're taking actually an active full and then shoving that up to absolute cold tier to move it for long-term storage. So think of, performance tier as your local on-prem spinning disk. You have your capacity tier, as I would consider that warm storage off-site, and then you have archive tier, which is your cold storage off-site. So really good stuff there. The other big thing I want to mention is expanded instant recovery. Now, this is how we actually achieve ultra low RTO. So what is instant recovery? And let me kind of break that down in a little bit of a nutshell. So how do we get the lowest RTO possible for production ready instant recovery of SQL or Oracle or even a NAS or a virtual machine? And that's how we do that with the instant VM recovery. So if you need to go from Hyper-V to VMware, or VMware to Hyper-V, or just spinning a virtual machine up on the fly because, whatever happened in production, there was a SAN failure, IP address, DNS issue, whatever that may be, you have this way to actually just spin up on the fly and very quickly and very efficiently bring back SQL, bring back Oracle, bring back these absolute mission critical appliances that are needed in your environment to keep that money going. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is these driving factors, right? So there's a lot of driving factors for change. Every single day I'd probably say there's, RTO goals and RPO goals. They kind of go hand in hand. And these are getting smaller. These are, these time frames are shrinking because, companies and businesses are realizing that's not necessarily, we don't need actually a really long RTO or we need it really short and sweet. So that way, when we do need a restore and things are happening and backs up against the wall, we can do those. And the other big thing is, most companies and most clients are realizing, downtime is absolutely horrible for everybody. It affects end users, affects the business as a whole, but also affects everything else that kind of goes hand in hand with that company. So really, there's some key capabilities here. What we're going to be able to do is be able to recover from these workloads, whether they're Microsoft SQL, Oracle, or NAS backup, and using that instant VM recovery. The other one is let's just say you had an instant recovery that failed SQL or Oracle databases in production. Regardless of size, we're going to be able to bring those back. So a lot of good stuff there. And one thing I'll say before I pass this back to one of my Platinum VCSP partners and my good buddy William is testing. And he brought it up earlier. Having some type of plan in place is absolutely mission critical. Like I said earlier, when things happen, most admins run around like their heads cut off, and I truly mean that because it's all hands on deck to figure out what's going on in production and making sure that we can get that back. Running tests is absolutely going to make that happen, make that way better of a process for everybody. The other one is you're going to figure out maybe your admin had a good understanding of X, Y, and Z, but didn't know how to fail back or to fail over. And having that before, the time of crisis is actually so mission critical. I can't say it enough because it's how fast you can recover. So putting these backup strategies to test and really putting your backup vendor to test, your Veeam to test, is really key because you want to make sure that when things happen, you have a plan in place to make sure everything is working hunky-dory the way it needs to. So the last thing I'll probably say is having a readiness plan is absolutely mission critical. And at this point, I'm going to pass it back over to our Platinum VCSP partner, William. And thanks for everybody for letting me ramble a little bit.
Thanks so much, Michael, for everything. And what Mike talked about with Veeam's capabilities, they empower you as a user to do amazing things yourself. Self-service, build it, deploy it, and manage it. That's perfect. On-prem, backups, local operations, that is exactly what you should be doing with your time and with your investment. The place where it starts to make a little less sense is when you look at disaster recovery. The amount of time that you actually use the environment on an annualized basis is not testing, right? Other than testing, is potentially once in 5 years, twice in 5 years, right? And having all that expense to put up infrastructure, switches, load balancers, everything to replicate your entire environment and kind of pray you never have to use it, it's pretty ridiculous, right? So if you think about it, and so, we've worked with Veeam to design easy pay-per-use storage replication at the core with the ability to instantiate those virtual machines in a highly compliant, high-performant VMware environment, right? And so you get really quick recovery, people there in our NOC 24/7 ready to help you, global redundancy. If once you have failed over, we can point that now production workload in any one of our other regions, replicate back or replicate to or replicate back to your environment if you're able to recover quickly. But we don't just stop there, right? We put Veeam at the heart of everything we do as an organization, right? In our data security cloud platform, which serves as the home for our disaster recovery capabilities, that backs up every single virtual machine in the environment by default. Customers of that production cloud hosting solution do not get a choice, right? We back up everything. We give you 50% of the storage that you've purchased for your primary hosting as backup target storage, and we maintain that for you. We help you do restorations. We give you self-service options to do restorations. Tons of capabilities there. We use it for offsite backup replication. We use it for full disaster recovery replication or kind of continuous replication. And ultimately, and more increasingly, we're using Veeam to help our customers get a cloud-based solution for backing up SaaS products, right? So managed backup for Office 365, which now includes Teams, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, Exchange, and then I think coming soon, Salesforce in a different product. There's so much stuff coming, right? And it's here for you to use right now to protect your business. We'll do it in any one of these locations worldwide, and we'll bring a whole host of capabilities from our bench to your environment. And I think that, you know, when the people that we work with, when they see how cost effectively that can be done, you know, it's quite insane. I'm thinking about what it used to cost me to do this back in the day, and it was crazy. So my marketing team, illustrious marketing team, wants me to run this poll for everybody. If you guys want to talk to us about a disaster recovery strategy, please go ahead and click yes. You know, we're going to walk you through all the options that you have at your disposal. Our teams are solution-based. They're trying really hard to make sure that you get the right thing, the right fit. We've got a ton of capabilities that you can target, whether that's bare metal on demand, using Backblaze or Wasabi or any of those guys, whether that's a fully kind of managed solution for full replication, or even something in between like Cloud Connect Backup that gives you a lot of kind of point in time recovery of specific bits of data. And I will tell you this as well. Right now, on the Cloud Connect Backup side, we're running a cool promotion around insider protection. So I think, I don't know the exact details that my team built, but we're enabling insider protection at special rates, so that even when customers have some type of issue, even if maybe an admin internally deletes something, we're keeping that around. You don't see it anymore, but it's there and it's available to be restored from in the future to have extra protection of those backups. All right, I'll close that down. Thank you everyone for clicking the button, and let's close that here, and then we will move to questions. All right, Q&A, get them in. We already had a few people kind of jump in with some questions, and we'll go there. Somebody asked, how does Veeam suggest that CDP is exploited regarding, okay, so it's a good question. Today, the CDP components that are in V11, the only option to use those would be to, in our environment at least, in actually in pretty much any cloud-based environment, would be to spin up our bare metal cloud instances, implement Veeam or on top of VMware, and then do CDP between them. That is possible today. It takes a bit of work. We're working on making that easier for the future, but also we're hoping, not committed, but we're hoping that in the next release of Veeam, we'll see CDP targeting our multi-tenant environments and make it really easy for those of you that need that level of protection. That's kind of the best answer I can give on that one. All right, let's see what else we got here as I thumb through. Mike, did you want to say anything on that while we go, or did I get it all? Okay.
No, you got it all. I just want to say that, yeah, we are going to be rolling it out more flexibility-wise to these multi-tenant environments for sure.
Perfect.
Definitely key feature.
Let's see here. All the backup server and hardened price quarter from you, but Oh yeah. Okay, Mike. So this is a good one on hardened repository. So if I put all my backups, as long as I check that immutable box, right? All of the backups in the hardened repository are immutable. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's the key thing that you said, William, is you check the immutable ticker box to allow for the immutable flag to be set on those particular data points.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Let's see. What about for archive tier? Ransomware protection, immutability for archive. Is that something that you guys can do or that we can do together?
Yeah, absolutely. So with GFS copies, we can put those into archive tier and having those immutable for AWS. I gotta remember. It's one of the A's, and I totally butchered that one.
No, yeah, no, certainly. And our object storage platform as well. So we have kind of two targets that we offer for Veeam backups today. So we offer an S3 compatible object storage platform that you can target directly for all of the S3 goodiness that Veeam is working on. And then we have the Cloud Connect environment that is not currently capable of that object locking capability, but we're working on it, to try to find a workaround solution for that as quickly as possible. There are some trade-offs, right? You use the S3 targeting capability, it's a little bit slower, restoration takes a little bit longer, needs to grab more data, sometimes can be more costly if you have egress fees from S3 or somebody else, from Amazon or somebody else. But it has the object lock capabilities. The Cloud Connect components, has very granular restoration, a lot of optimization, server-side processing, but it doesn't have the object lock capability. So we'll get there. Everybody, we're working on it real quick. Okay, let's do one more. Let's see here. Oh, how about on that immutability front? How does it look like if I want to extend that? Is there a way to do that, like make it last longer, or is that just something I need to like let the backup run again and then it'll flag it for another 30 days?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So as long as your backup is configured correctly, your next backup will roll up and already be immutable. So your last one will then, so everything rolling forward will just continue to be immutable going forward.
Each restore point is immutable for the time period that you've set.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Please grab the handouts. If you said yes, somebody will be in touch. We'll chat with you about different ideas. There's a ton of ways to recover your business. We're trying to make it easy and flexible. I hope everybody learned something. And I really, really, really thank everyone for continuing to come out, supporting us, listening to these webinars. Hopefully you get something out of it and it was worth your time, and I hope you have a great day.